Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football and welcome back to Football Theory. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by the newest member of the On Texas Football family, my good friend and fellow co-worker, esteemed colleague, my man Jeff Howe joining me. We'll get into the other side. Last week we talked about Texas' upcoming matchup versus Ohio State, new play callers on both sides of the ball. We talked about defense, Matt Patricia going up against Steve Sarkisian. Now we'll flip things and go to the offensive side for Ohio State. Talk about Brian Hartline, who is expected to call plays, or at least that's what some of the reports are saying. He's expected to call plays. Obviously, it'll be him in collaboration with Ryan Day. We'll talk about that matchup of the new play caller Brian Hartline versus PK, the defensive coordinator and play caller for the University of Texas. Before we do that, let's thank our fantastic sponsor of Football Theory, as always, our devoted sponsor, Laura Baker, the accomplished Austin realtor, Laura Baker. We really appreciate her ongoing support of On Texas Football and Football Theory. And Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. So if you've had any concerns or you have any questions regarding real estate in the Austin area, please don't hesitate to give her a call today. 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Or you can reach out at Laura at AndyAllenTeam.com. That's Laura at AndyAllenTeam.com. And really appreciate Laura Baker and her team for being a part of our team here at On Texas Football. All right, Jeff, let's talk about this a little bit. There are the reports, and obviously nothing confirmed until the season actually starts. But they're expected to have Brian Hartline actually calling plays. And now I think we know that since he's a first-time play caller, that this will be a cover version of Ryan Day's classic original offense, or whatever it is, right? It's a cover version of it. And his offense, as we know, the Ryan Day offense is heavily influenced by Chip Kelly, who was obviously a mentor for him and his former offensive coordinator and play caller from that national championship team last season, and also Urban Meyer, who obviously he came after Urban Meyer there at Ohio State. Two heavy influences, and that power pro spread to run philosophy. It's kind of the best way I can describe it through all this in order. It's a power pro or a pro power spread, but then to run is kind of the whole purpose of it. And I think that Ryan Day actually is one of, I think, the torch bearers of, if you will, that style of offense. And that's kind of the best way to describe it. So at least we know that the foundation of it will be the Ryan Day offense. What, if any, flexibility and freedom does Brian Hartline have to put his own spin on this cover version? Anytime you have a cover version of a song, they try to do it their own way, put their own little spin on it. What's Brian Hartline going to do? Is he going to actually be allowed to, put his own twist on it? Or will it be one of those kind of strict interpretations of the Ryan Day offense? I think that's what we still really don't know.
That's going to be the thing that I don't even think Ryan Day probably knows, Rod, until they get in the thick of it. When you've got a guy who's called plays, and suddenly, as a head coach, like Ryan Day did it up until last year, and then he gives that up. I think it was pretty easy for Ryan Day to give it up to Chip Kelly just because he respects Chip Kelly so much. That's his mentor. That's the guy that kind of broke him into coaching. So there's a lot of respect there. But I don't know that Brian Hartline and Ryan Day have that same kind of relationship. So is Ryan Day more likely to override a call? Look, he's the head coach. I think we should assume, and I think you got to go back to the Tom Herman era at Texas, where I think we all knew whether it was Tim Beck or Mike Yurcich or whoever was calling the plays, the buck had to stop somewhere, and it stopped with the head man. He had the final say. And I think that, you can give Chip Kelly a lot of credit for what Ohio State did last year, but I think to me, that's the thing that I want to know how that dynamic plays out, because Ryan Day is being paid to have the final say and make sure that final say is correct and puts Ohio State in the best position to win ball games. So I do think, though, Ryan Day, if we just look at Ryan Day just as an offensive mind, Rod, I think the thing that impresses me most with him is he took really two offenses, the one that he was most familiar with and the one that he came into at Ohio State. He was real familiar with the Chip Kelly spread offense, which, as we knew, it was all about space and pace and tempo, and then came to Ohio State with that Urban Meyer power spread offense. those were two offenses that, quite frankly, I think had run their course in college football.
Yeah.
Teams had kind of caught up to both of them, and both of them needed an overhaul. So I think you can look at what Ryan Day did as took the elements that were still working from Chip Kelly's offense, took the elements from Urban Meyer's offense that were still working, bring them together, and then boom, you've got like basically the power spread version, but you're doing it with, you know, an NFL caliber quarterback, with NFL personnel at wide receiver, with, you know, the best running backs. It's Ohio State. You should have the best personnel. But I feel if you look at kind of Urban Meyer's Ohio State trajectory, and I think that ended before a lot of Buckeyes fans felt it should, and that's drama for another day, but that offense needed to evolve, and Ryan Day evolved it, and the Chip Kelly offense needed to evolve. So I feel like Ohio State and Ryan Day, Rod, they needed each other right at the right time when Ryan Day got to Columbus, and now you've got the offense now, which it's been good enough to win you a lot of games.
Oh, yeah.
Won the national championship last year.
There's no doubt about it. And he continued to evolve it, right? Bringing in Chip Kelly was a big part, another part of that evolution. Because, you know, we'll get into this. You know, I remember even last season when they had the injuries on the offensive line, and we talked about it here at On Texas Football, they became more of a gap power scheme team. They actually were probably 70+% gap power schemes late in the year on their college football playoff title run. And they really changed course from being what is mostly in Ryan Day and Chip Kelly's background, from being, you know, inside zone teams. And we'll get into his running game and why the running game is so dynamic and versatile, because I think it's really important too. And then we'll talk about why the passing game is so sophisticated. I think it has a lot to do with his time in the NFL, with some of those sophisticated passing concepts. But, you know, one thing I've heard Ryan Day say, I think this will also be, you know, advantageous for Texas, because, you know, at least the Ryan Day offense is what they're working with. At least you know who they're going to be trying to get the ball to. And Ryan Day has talked about his key philosophy is players over plays. I wrote down a quote because I thought it was so good. He said, it's about players, not plays. At the end of the day, get the ball to your best players. And if those plays are working, guess what? I'll probably call those calls again. And if it doesn't, then won't get called again. And it's that simple. So at least, you know, early on, in the most simplistic form, and Texas probably did a better job last year than anybody else in the country when they played Ohio State, of taking away their main weapon. And they got a lot of them, by the way. It won't just be one guy, but taking away Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate's going to be the secondary. And then Max Clare, the tight end, actually is going to be pretty good in that offense. The passing game, that is going to be what Texas has to, in my opinion. I think the running game, I don't know if their running game will be as dynamic as it was last year. I do like C.J. Donaldson. I do like Peoples. I think they're really good players. I don't know if they are what Henderson and Judkins were last year in that backfield, potentially. I don't know if they're that dynamic. And the offensive line obviously has gone through some changes as well and lost some talent, but it's Ohio State, so they're just stockpiling talent. But I think the passing game, to me, is going to be key for Texas to be able to stop the passing game. And I think the key to that may be try to put some pressure on a young play caller, an inexperienced play caller, I should say. I don't know how young Brian Hartline is, relatively young, but inexperienced play caller and an inexperienced quarterback. And to me, you do that by putting pressure on that young quarterback. I think it's one of the keys in this matchup. Maybe that's how, even for PK, I always say to win big games, you got to break tendency. Maybe the way to break tendency is to light up that young quarterback, force an inexperienced play caller to adjust to that, and almost even force Ryan Day's hand to a certain point. I think that matchup, or that chess match, is going to be important too, because for Ryan Day, we know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith, to Carnell Tate, and you're trying to get it to Max Clare. I mean, that's ultimately what you're trying to do. I think everything else from that point on for Ohio State will be secondary, and they'll emphasize getting those playmakers the ball early, especially since Texas took Jeremiah Smith away last year.
That's the intriguing thing for me, not just in this game, but in this season defensively for Texas. What's going to be the next evolution for this defense for Pete Kwiatkowski? Because it's got to evolve. There's going to be something that happens, whether it's going to be built around a certain player, a certain personnel package, a sub package, something that PK and Johnny Nansen, maybe this summer when they're chopping it up in the office, maybe they just thought of something. Whatever it is, there's going to be something, Rob, that evolves this defense. And I love this quote. I got this, coaches give these anonymous quotes to your preseason magazines because they want to find out, hey, what do you know? So I can tell you this came from an SEC coach for one of those magazines on Texas, and this is a quote about the Texas defense. So talking about PK, said he's developed that defense over his time there. They know the system well. It's not super complicated, but they know where they're going to be. They're going to be 2-gap up front, let the linebackers and safeties make tackles. That's what makes them different. Those guys can trigger to stop the run, but you still can't beat them deep. That, to me, has been the beauty of the Texas defense, and I think that's kind of what we saw last year. If you go back from going from 23 to 24, PK's talked about this. The big thing he was worried about was losing Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. They were able, in the Big 12, they were able to just line up in a base defense, stay in a 2-high shell. They could stop the run and take away your pass game and really not worry about it. They could shut down an opponent's run game staying in a 2-high shell. They felt like they were going into 24 needing to play more 1-high safety, more post safety. They felt like they had to do that. They did more of it, Rod. I know you broke the numbers down. Like they did significantly more, probably more single high than Texas ever played under Pete Kwiatkowski. But you were so good up front with Collins and Broughton setting the tone, and then with Bill Norton brought to the table and Jermaine Lollet and on and on and on. You could be single high, 2 high. It didn't matter. You could still stop the run, stop the pass, and pretty much be in any kind of front, any kind of coverage, any kind of shell you wanted. Now that you've got that as the framework, like we know our base, if you're PK, you're thinking, I know my base defense, it can work no matter what, front, coverage, shell, whatever we want to do. Now can we go really start messing with quarterbacks? Can you get into that realm where we saw Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann get against Texas, where it's a lot of simulated pressures, you're throwing a lot of different looks at the quarterback. You're truly maximizing your personnel, Rod. We've used this term for years. You've used it back in our Longhorn Blitz days. We used the term weaponize. Can you weaponize Anthony Hill? Can you weaponize Colin Simmons or Jelani McDonald? Some of these guys you have on defense that are big time playmakers that are going to be around the ball and have a chance to make game changing plays for you. So to me, that's the next step for this defense. It's just a matter of how are they going to get there. And I think that's something, I'm with you. I would start that game 1 against Ohio State, because it doesn't matter if it's Julian saying whoever's going to be starting at quarterback for Ohio State, they're going to be seeing it for the first time. Typically your first game is going to be, against a G6 in-state school. And, you probably have a tougher time moving the ball in scrimmage situations. You're facing maybe the best defense in the country out of the gate. So that's a really tall order for a first-time starter, even as talented as whether it's Sayin or whoever's going to be starting for Ohio State.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I've heard, just defensive coordinators, period, talk about when you're playing inexperienced quarterbacks, you want to speed the game up for them, right? You want to speed it up, speed everything up. And the way you speed that up is you give them more information to process than they're able to do. So, right, just kind of overload their circuitry. And you do that by changing up change the fronts, like you talked about, rotating your safeties a lot, getting those guys in and out of different looks in the back end, even your corners, putting those guys in different looks. And I think once you give a young quarterback too much to process, on top of potentially bringing more blitzes and breaking tendency, because they're going to prepare this quarterback for, and this is one of Urban Meyer's strengths. I think Ryan Day's strength as well is the way they organize their offenses. They're organized for situations, and they're organized to be able to basically to be able to combat whatever the defense is presenting. Yeah. Right, so they know how to block that wide zone, the mid zone, the tight zone against every front that they have seen that you are going to utilize in that situation, against that personnel package, against that formation. That's how he builds the offensive game plan. And the only way to really kind of destroy that organizational advantage is to give them things they haven't seen.
Yeah.
You break tendency. Their whole entire game plan is based on, all right, we know what to do when we see this look, when we see this front, we're going to block it this exact way. If you're Texas, the best way to really get the advantage or flip the advantage, because they're building everything on what they expect, is to give them the unexpected. It's always been about breaking tendencies in big games. And you just said it, Jeff, this is a perfect opportunity in a game 1, because you never get game 1s this big. In a game 1 against an inexperienced quarterback, and you have experience at every level of your defense.
That's the key.
Guys who can get to their responsibility, but get there from a different look. I love when Dan Lanning always, there's a certain call they have where everybody on the defense is allowed to do whatever they want to, as long as they're within, I believe it's like 3 yards of their responsibility. And as long as they're within 3 yards at the snap, they can do whatever they want to do. You can let them do whatever they want to do. And it's it's really just to cause chaos and confusion among the protections and for the quarterback, and essentially the wide receivers too, because they're supposed to be on the same page with the quarterback about what they're seeing. And I think for Texas, you should have an element to that with an inexperienced play caller in Brian Hartline and an inexperienced quarterback in Julian Sand, or whoever the quarterback's going to be.
Yeah, what's interesting too, when you look at, I got a question for you, but what I was thinking about in there, I know I'm going to give a Texas football fan PTSD, so forgive me. But Manny Diaz's defense is one of those defenses that's complicated.
It is one of those.
Really complex.
Mm-hmm.
And that defense worked great when you had Keaston Randall and Keenan
Robinson, Manuel Acho,
like Gideon, Kenneth Caro.
Yeah.
Even Quandre as a freshman was an old soul at that point. I mean, those other guys, they had learned defense under Will Muschamp. So you came into a very fundamentally sound defense, new basic alignment assignment football. Yeah, your Xbox blitzes, as I'll call them, that stuff could work. There were times where it didn't, but more often than not, it worked because you had guys that played on instincts and knew where to go. When those guys left the following year, especially when, if you think back to that 2012 season, that game down at Oxford where they hung 66 on Ole Miss, Jordan Hicks, we still don't, over a decade later, we still don't officially know what the injury was. I believe it was a torn groin, some kind of groin injury. But anyway, Jordan Hicks is done for the year. That defense completely fell apart because you lost all your experience at that point. Well, you've got guys unsure of where they're going to go. And what you end up with is that's how you end up with big, huge gaps exposed. Homer fans will know this too. Alex Grinch's defense is one of those. It's in that Ryan Brothers defense, that kind of the roots of like the Buddy Ryan. It is high risk, it is high reward. You just sometimes get the high risk part, and you go back and look at Alex Grinch that first year he was at OU. When you had Neville Gallimore and Kenneth Murray, you had some guys that were experienced guys that were NFL players. Your stuff worked. As you became less and less experienced, your stuff didn't work as much because now you've got inexperienced guys. You're unsure of what to do, running a really complex system. Everything goes haywire real quick. That is the difference with Texas now, though. PK, we know PK's defense, it's not that complex. And you want it that way. If you're at a place like Texas, you shouldn't want your guys having to think about 1,000 different things to go play football. You just want them to cut loose and play on instincts. Now that these guys are truly, like Anthony Hill at this point, is in sync with the defense, and the same thing with Michael Taft, and the same thing with the guy with a guy like Colin Simmons. Continuing to learn the defense. He's probably further. He got further ahead last year than I thought he would be. As crazy as that sounds, we knew he was good, but I didn't expect him to be that in tune with what they were doing. You still got a guy like Manny Muhammad who's been there for a minute, Jelani McDonald, and so on and so forth. You've got experience on this defense. Now you can just kind of let the next step is you trust these guys to go cut it loose. It's just a matter of what it looks like now.
Yep, I totally agree. That's a good point, though, about the Manny Diaz defense. The defense where you have guys moving and shifting, the ghost fronts and all that kind of stuff. Real quick, because if Texas wants to deploy some of these exotic looks and utilize their pass rushing ability and be able to get after an inexperienced quarterback, they got to stop the run early on. Real quick, Ryan Day's kind of run philosophy, I've heard him talk about this. They're mostly a zone team. That's what they want to be. That's why they broke tendency last year toward the end of the season, becoming more of a gap power scheme run offense because of the injuries on the offensive line. I think it just simplified things for their really young offensive linemen. But he talks about them having 5 to 6 variations of tight zone, mid zone, and outside zone. And they build their game plan based on which 2 variations of each of those matches up best with your defense. He also talks about they have power, they have counter. He said how they get to it in terms of the ways they get to it, personnel formations, that changes. But he said they have counter. They have power, and they usually have a couple of perimeter runs. Sometimes just old school sweep. It could be jet sweeps, could be different things. But he talks about mostly the bread and butter, the heart and soul of their run game are those multiple variations of the zone play. The tight zone, the mid zone, and the wide zone. And for Texas, it's going to be really important. You have solutions to all those different variations that they're going to potentially throw at you, and that you know how to identify them, that your best players know how to identify them, and they know exactly how to beat them to the point of attack. As we know with Texas, you can do that. You can beat it with a zone team, especially an outside zone team. You can really beat them because there's basically every different variation. He's got cowboy, he's got buck, he's got a raider. These are all different variations of the different types of zone. But it's just the aiming point, how they block it. Number one changes. They block it with different guys. Same defenders they're blocking, but they block them with different players. And the aiming point for the running back changes. Whether it's the inside hip of the guard or outside hip of the tackle, whatever it may be, right? That also changes. So with the run, if you can identify exactly what kind of zone it is, you really can cut it off. You can beat them to the point of attack, which we've seen teams do against Texas. Really good teams like Georgia, Ohio State, of course. Hell, Arizona State did it against Texas.
Arizona State team very well. Yeah,
that's going to be really important. I mean, that sounds like that's one thing, but that's how you get to second and long and third and long, and that's where you win if you're a Texas situationally. But you got to win on first down, and the key is got to stop them zone runs that Ohio State brings to Texas. They're so effective.
You mentioned their offensive line, Rod. Like you said, they were really beat up last year, and they still ended up having they had 2 first-rounders on that offensive line with Josh Simmons and Donovan Jackson. It's just you were so beat up. There were times, especially in the middle of the year, those guys were having to play out of position just because they were trying to mix it up and find the right mix, and eventually they got it together. My question for you to end this, though, when you look up front, I feel like Anthony Hill, Leonga Lafau, those 2 guys is the communication system of basically your defensive front. I feel like those 2 guys have seen enough. They've played enough. I think they're going to be fine. My thing is you lose Jahdae Barron and you lose Andrew Makuba. You got guys back there like Michael Taft's coming back. Manny Muhammad's played a lot of football. Jelani McDonald played a ton last year. Rod, this kind of I feel like you're the perfect person to answer this question because you played in the secondary like this going from 01 to 02. It was year 2 with Coach Akina, but you lose Quentin Jammer. You lose a guy who was one of those kind of vocal guys, communication center, quarterback of the defense guys with Ahmad Brooks. It wasn't really starting over, but now did you feel like it was on you and Nathan Vasher to bring a young Michael Huff and a young Cedric Griffin up to speed? And is that now the role that Michael Taft and Manny Muhammad and Jelani McDonald need to play is whoever that opposite corner is? I'll throw Gilbo in there too. Whoever that opposite corner is, whoever's going to be playing the nickel, whoever that other safety is, the guys coming back have to make sure the communication doesn't just fall off a cliff at this point because it was so good last year.
Yeah, and all it takes is one guy, right? It's not just communication too. That's big, and they were really, like you said, it was immaculate communication last year in that secondary. Not a lot of busts at all. But also the eye discipline of everybody in the second. That's one thing they were really good at last year. The communication was great, but the discipline with the players' eyes was really, really good. They got in trouble. A couple of guys got in trouble last year, a couple of times, maybe a Gilbo here and there, maybe Malik Muhammad here and there. But for the most part, those guys had great eyes, been disciplined in their progressions, just like quarterbacks have progressions to go from A, B to C. So do defenders, right? I got to go. This is my first key. Then I got to go to my second key. I can't spend too much time staring at just one of my keys. I got to go from A, B to C to D. And if I do it disciplined enough, my eyes will lead me to the right place, right? And my feet go where my eyes go. And that's what I saw a lot last year. Guys were great. That's why they made a lot of plays as help defenders. Jahdae Barron, I think half his interceptions came as a secondary defender. Andrew Makuba was the same way. He was secondary and tertiary defenders making plays on the football in that pattern match coverage because they were so good with their eyes. Okay, real quick. So I know we're into things here. So let's talk about the passing games really quickly. One thing I'll tell you about the passing game, the way he sets it up, short game, intermediate passing game, of course. But when you get into the deeper routes, it's interesting because he has crossers, deep ones and shallow ones to try to beat man coverage. And he has what he calls ISOs. And these are basically specific plays just to get his best players isolated on a specific defender and get them one-on-one. He's got ISO plays. You got to have a solution for his ISO plays because they're going to be for Max Clare, Jeremiah Smith, and Carnell Tate. And Texas did a good job last year. And you talked about this, Jeff, the shots. And I noticed this too. Ryan Day likes to take shots. Now, Chip Kelly is not a guy that likes to take a lot of shots downfield. You go look at UCLA's deep ball rate for UCLA. He only had one season there where his quarterback was over 11% deep ball rate. But Ryan Day's quarterbacks, their deep ball rate, Justin Fields, 21%, 14%. This is passes 20 yards or more down the field. CJ Stroud, 15.6%, 14%. Hell, even Kyle McCord was 13.6%. Chip Kelly comes in, and Will Howard's deep ball rate is 11%. But Kim Kardashian, Nicki Minaj, Serena Williams size, Cardi B size, Megan Thee Stallion size, but in the playoffs, it jumped to 17%. In one of the games, one of your playoff games, he had a 17%, and then you also had a 15% deep ball rate against Oregon. So Tennessee, Will Howard had a 17% deep ball rate, 15% against Oregon. So it did jump up in those games. Didn't jump up against Texas because Texas kept an umbrella pretty much over their defense, played a lot of bracket coverage on Jeremiah Smith as well. So they deterred them from throwing it deep. But that was Chip Kelly calling the plays. I wonder now that that's Ryan Day's offense, Brian Hartline calling the plays, will that deep ball rate go up? And you just said it, Jeff, Texas has to have an answer for it. They can't give up cheap ones, not to this Ohio State offense. And I think that would be one of the ways that Texas can at least be able to frustrate this Ohio State offense by limiting the explosive plays, forcing them to go down the field 13, 14, 15 play drives, win situationally, which is also somewhere where Ryan Day and Brian Hartline in 2023, they struggled situationally just a little bit. I went and looked at the third down. You go look at third downs, they were 33rd, and in red zone and touchdown percentage in red zone, they were 58th and 47th. Some of the lowest numbers efficiency wise in third down and in red zone since Ryan Day's been there at Ohio State. That may be somewhere else Texas can win in this matchup.
What is it with Ryan Day and Sark, guys that have put plenty of talent in the NFL, very highly regarded? I mean, they've got skins on the wall, both accomplished. You think of guys that can dial up explosive plays, that their offenses live on explosive plays. You think about those two guys, the red zone issues and the third down issues. Like it's the same thing with both of them. And I don't know. I don't know if it's just there's not enough genius to go around to all situations in football. I don't know, but to
your point, Jeff, that third, this is crazy. We won't go deep into this. I know we're at the end of it. I'll say so third down ranking for Ohio State since 2019, first, 10th, second, 27, and they've been 33rd the last 2 years. So Chip Kelly kind of kept it from this. It was kind of, decreasing and sliding. He at least was able to stop the slide of their third down efficiency. But red zone, here is it since 2019. They were 30th. They were 100th in 2020, 12th in 2021, second in 2022, 58th in red zone offense in 2023. And Chip Kelly brought it up to 31st, but they were 5th in touchdown percentage in the red zone. So the worst red zone year he had was 2020. He was 100th in red zone offense, 57th in touchdown percentage in red zone, and then second worst was 2023 when Ryan Day was calling plays with Brian Hartline as the LC. So I don't know what is. Also, that was their worst year for explosive plays. They only had 68. They were 35th in the country in 2023 in explosive plays. Hell, last year they were 15th. They were 10th in 2022, second in 2021. 21st in 2020 and 4th in 2019. So he's always been top 20, top 15 in explosive plays, except for 1 year. And that's when Brian Hartline was the OC and he was calling the plays. So they don't sync something. They're not in sync situationally, and maybe with a lot of those explosive plays, but maybe they fixed whatever that issue was in 2023. Yeah,
it's crazy. To your point though, offenses that thrive on explosive plays, that live on the explosive plays, what's the counterpunch? You got to make them earn it. Hey, if you want to score, great. You're going to have to do it in 8, 9, 10, 12 plays. Like, we're not going to give you the cheap chunk yardage play. And as sound as Texas was, to your point earlier on, we didn't see a lot of blown coverages from Texas last year. Very, very few. As a matter of fact, the one Manny Muhammad gave up on the halfback pass in the Peach Bowl, that's why that was so staggering to see, because you just didn't see Texas.
It's wild.
Last year. Yeah, you just didn't see it. So, and go back and look last year. PK had a brilliant game plan last year, because you look at Ohio State, it's like Jeremiah Smith is not going to beat us. He had 1 catch for 3 yards. Hey, Carnell Tate 7 for 87, Emeka Ibuka 5 for 51, G. Scott 5 for 30. Those guys were going to have to beat you pretty much, no more than 10 yards down the field and between the numbers. Like, if you want to move the ball here, great, move it here, but we're not giving you outside the numbers, and we're not giving you anything deep.
Yep. That was great game plan last year. All right. Good stuff, Jeff, as always. Let's thank our sponsor, Laura Baker, one more time. Football Theory brought to you by accomplished Austin Realtor Laura Baker. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. So if you have any concerns or you have any issues, questions regarding real estate in the Austin area, please don't hesitate to give her a call today. 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Or reach out at Laura@AndyAllenTeam.com. That's Laura@AndyAllenTeam.com. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Well, appreciate the expertise, man. I always enjoy our football theory conversations. We'll be back with another episode next week. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes, twisting and tweaking the dials. Nobody does it better than Matthew. He's the real MVP. Thank you to accomplished Austin Realtor Laura Baker. And thank you guys out there for joining us as well. For Jeff, for Matthew, and for accomplished Austin Realtor Laura Baker, I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.